Welcome to Responding Safely in an Emergency, Fire Safety and Evacuation Procedures for Assisted Living. Brought to you by American Way University. My name is Angie Danielski, and I will be your guide during this training. Here is a brief overview of what the fifth segment of the fire safety presentation will cover. We will review evacuation planning, evacuation maps, and evacuation classifications for residents. To begin discussing evacuation planning, we will first look at emergency plan requirements. The emergency plan must be specific and include a systematic evacuation. Caregivers should be able to follow the plan and help residents evacuate in an orderly manner without creating chaos. Although specific staff members may vary, it is still important to assign roles to caregivers so that everybody knows exactly what to do to evacuate residents safely and quickly. This can include checklists that may be used during emergencies. One staff member should be assigned to ensuring that all residents and staff are accounted for on the outside of the building. The evacuation plan must be adequate for all residents. This means that the plan must be able to meet the needs of each resident, whether it is difficulty with mobility, hearing, or vision, or any other special requirement. Emergency plans largely focus on what to do in the event of a fire. However, other emergency situations may occur, and weather emergencies that are common in Wisconsin must be included in the emergency plan. The most likely weather emergencies in Wisconsin are tornadoes, flooding, and blizzards. Assisted living houses must have an interior room or hallway where residents can take shelter during a tornado. Utilizing a checklist is extremely helpful to account for all residents. The emergency plan must also include procedures on what to do in the event a resident is found missing. This can include if the resident is missing during an emergency, but also must include procedures on steps to follow if there is not an emergency situation like a fire, tornado, or flood, but a resident is found missing. Lastly, emergency procedures should include planning for resident care during evacuation, both short-term and long-term. Short-term evacuation plans can be moving residents to a nearby building, such as a school, community center, or other building. This is especially important when the weather is at either extreme, hot and humid in the summer, or very cold and below zero in the winter. Likewise, long-term evacuation plans must also be included in the event that part or all of the assisted living building is damaged or becomes unlivable for residents. Evacuation maps must include certain items to ensure resident safety. Here is a simple example of an evacuation map that shows the minimum requirements for an evacuation map. Evacuation diagrams should include a marked exit path on how to exit the building. Additionally, 2 ways of exit should be identified so that if the primary path of exit is blocked, the resident could follow the map to an alternate route. Here, the primary evacuation route is marked by a solid line, and the secondary route is the dashed line. Evacuation maps must be posted at least once per floor at minimum, but are usually posted in more than one location to allow residents to easily locate the map in the event of an emergency. If a building has smoke compartments, they also must be identified on the evacuation map. We will discuss smoke compartments later in the presentation. No smoke compartments exist on this map. Lastly, a meeting place on the outside of the building must be identified on the map. The meeting place should be marked along with its location in writing so that residents will go to the meeting place to check in with staff members immediately upon exiting the building. This map also indicates the location of fire extinguishers. However, That is not a requirement on an evacuation map, just something that is helpful. Before specifically talking about classifying residents, we will first briefly look at how an assisted living is classified. An assisted living is classified either by size or by resident status. When talking about size, it means the number of residents an assisted living can hold or accommodate if all rooms or beds are full. A small CBRF is defined as 5 to 8 residents, a medium CBRF 9 to 20 residents, and a large CBRF is defined as more than 20 residents. Depending on the size of the assisted living home, the fire safety requirements will vary. When defining an assisted living category based on resident status, there are two categories. An assisted living classified as Category A will only have residents who are mentally and physically capable of responding to a fire alarm by exiting the CBRF without any help, verbal or physical prompting. This means that the resident is able to understand what the fire alarm means and know what to do and where to go in the event of an emergency. Category C, on the other hand, is defined as a CBRF who has residents where one or more of the residents are not mentally capable of responding to a fire alarm by exiting the CBRF without any help, verbal or physical prompting. Most assisted livings are classified under Category C so they can accept residents who can exit without prompting and those who need assistance. In order to know what the evacuation needs of each resident are, an evacuation needs assessment must be documented for every resident. Evacuation needs assessments must be done within 3 days of admission. In some assisted living homes, residents are also reassessed 30 days after move-in once staff have had a chance to get to know the resident and better understand evacuation needs. This reassessment after 30 days is not required by state law. Residents are also assessed on an annual basis to determine evacuation needs and update documentation. If there is a major change in condition, whether that be health, mental status, or mobility, the resident must also be reassessed at that time. All staff members need to be aware of the evacuation needs of each and every resident so that if there was an emergency situation, they would know what to do or potentially where to go. We can further categorize residents based on their physical abilities to evacuate in the event of an emergency. Remember, each resident has already been categorized into either Category A or C depending on their mental capability. There are 3 classes a resident can be assigned to. This is defined according to their physical abilities. For example, a resident can be Category A, Class Semi-Ambulatory, or Category C, Class Ambulatory. The ambulatory class is defined as a resident who can stand on their own and exit the building without assistance. The resident may have an assistive device, such as a walker, cane, or crutches, but can exit the building in less than 2 minutes. A resident classified as semi-ambulatory may require some assistance with standing or transferring, but will be able to exit the building largely on their own. Residents in this class may have assistive devices, as mentioned in the previous class, but also may be in a wheelchair where they would be able to wheel themselves out of the building. A semi-ambulatory resident would be able to evacuate in 2 to 4 minutes. A resident in the non-ambulatory class would be a resident who cannot stand or transfer on their own and would need a lot of assistance, either with a strong 2-person assist or a lift to transfer. This resident would require over 4 minutes to evacuate. In total, a resident can be categorized into one of 6 different categories. It is important to note that the resident is classified according to worst case scenarios, most likely if they were in bed and needed to evacuate. This concludes the 5th section of the American Way University training of Responding Safely in an Emergency, Fire Safety and Evacuation Procedures for Assisted Living.